So, hello, this is the Green Corner Rebellion Show. Today I'm here with Michael Brooks of The Michael Brooks Show and The Majority Report, one of my biggest influences in life, one of the reasons why this show exists. So, how are you doing today?
Wow, that's quite an honor there, Gregory. But thanks for having me on. It's an honor, man, and it's cool watching you get this going.
Thanks. So first question I have here is, where are you from and where did you grow up at?
Well, I grew up mostly in Massachusetts. My parents are both from Long Island, and they had me. They were, the things were pretty precarious, to be honest. So I was actually born outside of D.C., and then family went back to New York, and they were all over the place when I was, really little, between Brooklyn and Long Island and a couple other places. And then they went up almost like on a lark up to like, to New England, to Western Mass. First, they were supposed to go to Vermont. And I think the story is actually that somehow, my dad got offered some kind of job to like manage a bed and breakfast or something really random like that. And then basically they showed up, and the woman who owned it was like, "Well, we didn't know you had a kid. Like, get out of here." So they were basically, totally broke and kind of stuck up there. And anyways, but we ended up kind of moving around, multiple places. We did a lot of moves, but basically stayed in Western Mass, which is, yeah, I mean, that's where I grew up. Yeah.
All right. And how did you end up on the Majority Report? Like what year and what was it like being on a progressive podcast YouTube show around that time?
Well, I did a couple of segments. I was back in West. I went to college, and I studied international relations, and I had a bunch of different you know, it was very much kind of different adventures in my 20s. Some of them were cool, some of them were very fun. So, like, I co-founded and ran an arts nonprofit with some people, then, was unemployed for long periods of time, did some brand strategy work, and then kind of ended up actually leaving New York, going back up to Massachusetts, sort of figuring out what I was going to do. And I met and did a few segments with David Packman back up in the day, and he ended up introducing me to Sam. And I was about to go to graduate school, and Sam offered me a job as a producer. And basically, I mean, gradually, just my role on that show changed. Where I started to sub for Sam and realized that this is something I'd like to do. I had no idea how I would end up making a living at it or succeeding or anything like that. So, it was a big risk. It was really precarious for a while, but it was fun at times and rewarding. 2012, it was very, yeah, I mean, it was very, very different. This was not a scene at all. If I told people what I did, they would go, "Oh, okay." They had no idea. Um, Beyond maybe they had seen Sam on MSNBC or something, or maybe they remembered that Air America existed. So it wasn't, it was, and that really, I would say, was the case up until like maybe 2016. I mean, certainly for me, I was, super obscure, personally, but I would say even just the last year or two, this whole scene has kind of changed. We're still nowhere near as powerful as cable, obviously, and people shouldn't, get too far ahead of ourselves. But the last couple of years, there's been a much bigger growth of a whole bunch of different shows and, things like Jacobin and stuff like that. But back then, it was TYT and us, and you just felt like a little kind of tiny boat surrounded by a bunch of steam engines, and and I basically started the summer of the Obama reelection campaign. And, obviously we wanted Obama to get reelected, but, politics was pretty narrow. I mean, the only thing that was kind of exciting at that point was, Occupy Wall Street that had happened in 2011. I wasn't on the show at that point, but certainly it, spoke to what I was, going through, having graduated in 2009. So, Lots changed, but it was just following instincts and also, look, I think if I ended up getting promoted up some branding agency or something, I mean, I probably would have been doing that and hated it in a lot of ways, but I would have been. So, but I mean, but who knows? I mean, I think part of the reason that I probably didn't stay on that trajectory was, I wasn't really meant to, frankly. So, yeah, so here we are.
That's interesting. Um, but yeah, because whenever, what was it around? You said 2012, 2011.
Mhm.
Around that time, I was watching, I mean, I was like a teenager at the time, but I was watching Free Speech TV and stuff like that. And so I knew who David Pakman was at the time, and Ring of Fire, stuff like that,
So you
Democracy
got into
Now!
politics when you were real young.
Oh yes,
Oh,
like
that's
I
okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I was following it from around a little bit before then. Like the 2008 election was the first election I really like followed pretty closely, kind of. But back then I was watching Tom Hartman and stuff like that. So yeah.
Wow,
Oh,
that's cool. That's cool. I definitely started following politics and thinking about politics when I was very young myself.
cool. So what made you want to start the Michael Brooks Show?
I mean, that was just the next, that was the natural progression. Um, I had sort of grown on the majority report and, it's a great opportunity, but obviously I needed to do a lot more with my career and, in terms of my own just, finances and my own creativity. I mean, everything, it was just, I think I had, it's a great opportunity, but there's kind of a limit, um, as to how much it could grow for me. And, I was honestly pretty scared about it. I didn't really have, because, to me, it wasn't like, I did good work. And I was proud of what I contributed to the show. And, I had done other things and published articles and here and there and occasionally been on Al Jazeera or whatever. So I knew I could do a good show, but I didn't know, I'm just a guy who goes to the studio and does a podcast. I had no idea what the audience was and whatever. So, but that was really the next step, was gonna, basically do that and see if it worked. And then on the other hand, I mean, I really had a really strong feeling about the kind of topics I wanted to talk about. I felt like I really wanted there to be a lot more internationalism. That's obviously something that's a really big deal to me. I think I was already not as much as I am now, but I was, tuning into more people like Adolph Reed and other people I really admire, and really seeing like that there's major shortcomings and problems on the left. And I actually want us to win. I don't want us to just sort of sit around and talk to each other, even though obviously that's a lot of what we do. And that isn't necessarily bad, but I want us to go way beyond that. And so I just started to think, to really see that this show it could be historical, but it could still also hopefully be funny and entertaining, and it could be designed to go into lots of deep dives. And, obviously things have changed a lot because the show has done pretty well. And so there's a whole much bigger set of people that, we have on and are talking to. But even before, I mean, I already kind of felt like, hey, this is a show that can have on Milton Alamati, and then it can have on, Bashkar and any number of other people. And now it's only grown to like, Richard Wolff and Adolph Reed and Anna Kasparian, and I mean, all of these amazing people. And I do think that there's a good synthesis point in the show. I think it brings together a lot of different things in a unique and really significant way. So, yeah. But so it was kind of like, between necessity. That's literally, I needed to do something else. I needed to figure out how to, not live with a bunch of roommates forever, and start to pay off loans and start to, figure out, how this is actually going to be a durable thing. And that's really the business now. I mean, you know, ultimately, I think in media, you have to build some type of community and approach it in a real kind of down to earth way, because that's sort of the only way I think mostly that it's going to happen. as the even more and more. I mean, even just what we're going through now, we're going to see, and it's terrible. Like the outline just went under. A lot of really, really talented people don't have work, and a lot of the business models have really collapsed. So I think it's going to be some combination of, some situations like TMBS, whatever, and then also maybe some nonprofit resurgence and maybe some models we haven't even thought about yet. But anyways, and also, I wanted to do the show. I had in mind a show that was not being done. Uh, and that's always a good, it's really simple, right? But it was just like the show, and in way more so now than even 2 years ago when I started it. It's really like, what is the show that I'm not watching because it doesn't exist,
Yeah.
and then let's make that.
Yeah. Because what was it? I started watching Majority Report around August 2017, and it was like a week before you started the Michael Brooks show.
Oh wow,
But,
that's crazy.
yeah, so you talked about it like whenever you hosted that week, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll check out this guy's show whenever he starts it. Then been watching ever since.
Oh well, thank
So,
you,
yeah,
thank you. Yep, it was there. Waz was in studio with me, and we announced it. Yeah.
yeah. So what and who has specifically influenced your politics and made you become a socialist?
Hmm.
What was the combination of things? Was it some specific thing, one specific thing, or was it a combination of things?
Oh, it's a combination. I don't have a real direct path. I mean, I'll talk about a couple. I mean, I was interested in politics when I was unusually young. There's no doubt about that. And I definitely had a sense that my place would be on the left because of, I mean, first of all, I think because I grew up, not having money, that really affects how you think. And then also, I, you know, what I was drawn to and interested in was things like, you know, I was really fascinated when I was 13. As an example, probably the first thing that I did a tremendous amount of kind of independent reading on was things like the civil rights movement, what happened in the 60s and the 50s in the United States. That was a very big influence on me. Um, so, and there was some left wing politics in my family. And then I think, I went through, I think in the kind of high school years, I did some, World Bank protests. There was a lot of kind of anarchism in the air. Everybody read Noam Chomsky and stuff like that. And so, and it's funny because that really was sort of the extent of what was considered, you know, like just if you kind of basically thought America should have like universal health care and we shouldn't go and, murder people across the world, like that was just kind of like basic left wing stuff. And then, in college, I mean, I had a long period of time where I was kind of trying to figure out my own politics and figure out my career, and in some ways was really interested in, I did a lot of reading about people like Tony Blair and Bill Clinton and Obama, and because it was like at least these people are winning, and maybe there's no real other way of doing anything in today's world. Um, and also, I think I had a lot of like, I guess like the kind of rhetoric of like internalized like shame or whatever, like because I didn't go to a prep school, because I didn't come from means or whatever. Um, and so, but at the same time in college, I mean, I did take some courses specifically on reading Marx, and I think more so than, I didn't even realize as much at the time. Like I read the texts, I did, pretty well in the classes, but I think in retrospect, it really was a significant thing because when you have like I'm actually reading this Castro conversation, a book of dialogues with Castro right now, and he sort of talks about this idea of like being a utopian socialist, like this, just generally having some idea of socialism in a really broad sense, that society should take care of people, that workers should have some power, that there should be some kind of basic human decency. And there's a real broad way, we could be thinking about any number of things when we kind of say that. But when I read Marx in college, it did give me an alternative way of understanding how my world worked. And it made a lot of intuitive sense to me. So I think ever since then, and I still, I didn't want to, I was very, I think because I spent some time kind of in the sort of high school age and sort of, doing a little bit, not a huge amount, but a little bit of like, church basement, left wing politics and Green Party stuff and protests and everything. So I kind of, I wanted to sort of find my own way. And I was certainly not interested in being a part of like a Trotskyite sect or whatever. But I think that it did start to shape how I looked at the world. And then, by the time, and it's still, evolving. I think, one of the things that's interesting about doing work like we do is you have to stay rooted in principles, and then you also have to really look at like what is a point of emphasis. Like there were things that I was much more critical of like 4 or 5 years ago that I don't think are frankly as serious today. And so my concerns are in different places. But the more I've sort of gone on, I think that I think the kind of, Marx's theories of labor make a lot of sense to me. And looking at frameworks that have come out of Marxism in terms of the international system make a lot of sense to me. And Gramsci's ideas about how kind of cultures conform to economics, it makes a lot of sense to me. But, I think we got to always be reading a lot of stuff, thinking about a lot of different things. And, there's no kind of magic bullet. And then there's there's the other part of being a socialist, which is just, I think, some kind of big sense of, a basic sense of justice and dignity and but also power for everybody. So it's not just that everybody's taken care of, it's that everybody actually has some meaningful ability to really take their lives and under, have control and power over their circumstances. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Next question here is, in your show, you put a lot of emphasis on being an internationalist and how our thinking of the world and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that a lot of other shows, like you said earlier, they don't really put any emphasis on this. So what made you want to focus your show on that, and what influenced you to have your thinking in that way?
Well, by the way, I do think there's different people who do great international, stuff. So I do want to just say that. But I think, part of it, honestly, again, is just being like, picture a kid who's like kind of, out living in the middle of nowhere. It's sometimes pretty isolated, geographically, financially, whatever. And, is listening to the BBC World Service and is just like totally having his mind blown by all the different things happening in the world, I was definitely one of those kids who, and I think some people are like this. Some people have, I have friends, some people have very internationalized upbringings in a variety of ways. They've been immigrants, so they've lived in multiple different places or whatever. I didn't have any of that. I wasn't even in a plane until well later in my teen years, right? But I did think that the world was fascinating. And I also thought, I was very attuned to the abuses of U.S. foreign policy, but I was also interested in, the sort of the strategic, the like, how does the world system actually work? What are different countries' interests? Can other things besides nation states play a role in international politics? Can labor organize internationally the way business organize? All this kind of stuff. And, in some ways, it's just the same thing. I think it's fascinating. And I think that it's not just like a cliche. We really do live in a really interdependent world. And so I think this stuff matters innately. And then there's other things where I think that some of the debates that get really silly here um, can actually be better understood, like by looking at international examples, can make people think a lot more rigorously here. And then, with someone like Lula or Mujica, you have these leaders that it's like, hey, yeah, they're not in the United States, but I think these are much better models of being leaders, basically, and how we could think about leadership. But the bottom line is, it really interests me, and I think mostly, certainly not always, we have a sense of how to make it interesting for people too and relevant. So it isn't some kind of dry seminar or whatever. It's human and it's relevant.
Yeah, because since I've been watching your show, I've gotten more interested in Latin America and South America and the history of those places, especially since you talk about Lula a lot.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, so that's something I really like about your show.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see here. So what? Okay, so this is a question about your book. So what
Yeah.
influenced you to write your book? First, tell me the name, and
Yes.
then tell me what it's about. But then, yeah,
So
go
it's
ahead.
called Against the Web, a cosmopolitan answer to the new right. And part of it was definitely just, wanting to I got approached by Zero Books to write a book in 2018 when that whole scene was really popping off. And it was just sort of like, hey, you've done videos that critique these people. Do you want to actually write like a kind of more fully fleshed out criticism? And so there is that's definitely a big part of the book, is looking at these guys and the problems in their thinking, and what it reflects about where we're at. But I think what's maybe most exciting is what I've tried to do is kind of like an answer to them, is put forward this kind of internationalist socialist idea, or way of doing politics that I think is, it's very critical of the identitarian stuff that Adolf Reed writes about. It's real and critiques better than everybody, but it's also very critical of a kind of narrow American or Eurocentric focus. Like, we really do have to be global in our orientation, but in an actually global way, where we're understanding how struggles connect together and how we can build out. Because if the left doesn't have a mass base, there's never going to be any chance of winning anything. So that's sort of what the book does.
All right. And when is it going to be available for purchase?
It is available for it is on pre-order, so you can go purchase
Okay.
it now. I always recommend people go to Red Emma's, which is a great independent bookseller in Baltimore, to purchase it. But I think the official release date is April 24th.
All right.
Yeah.
And last question I have here is, who are your top 5 favorite rappers of all time?
This is a really hard question. Who are my top 5 favorite rappers of all time? Biggie, definitely Biggie. Nas. I'm gonna just actually, this is very cliche. Nas, Biggie, and Jay-Z really are. I do think these are the top 3. But I am very East Coast bias for sure. I mean, there's some West Coast rap that I like, and I'm not like opposed to Southern rap, but it's not something you're gonna catch me listening to that much. So I'm very New York biased, but I do think, like, it's just hard to convince me that, like, who's putting out a better album than like a Ready to Die or whatever. Um, I love Dipset. I really, really like Dipset, and I like. Now I don't know if it's a favorite, but more recently, right? Like, I listen to Drake a little bit. I listen to Pusha T, whatever. But the last, like, newer album, at this point, it's not even new anymore. It's, what is it, like a year old or something? The latest, most current hip hop album that I have listened to the entire album and listened to it repeatedly is Memphis Bleek's latest album, whose name I'm totally forgetting now. But that album is that's an incredible album. But honestly, I'm listening to a lot of, and I'm a little bit more current with some reggae music right now. But I think at the end of the day, because even now, like everybody knows that I really like Nas, but I haven't been listening to as much Nas recent. I mean, I listen to Nas, but I haven't been on a big Nas kick for a really long time. But but it's always even Jay, who is definitely like the least of those three to me, for me personally.
Mhm.
There's always like a base. Like I'm not listening to a huge amount of hip hop right now, but I am listening to Biggie probably daily. And that will probably be the same thing with Jay-Z soon, and it will probably be the same thing with Nas. And actually, like, even though I would not put Dipset on that level, Dipset's kind of like that for me too. But also, like, honestly, I really like Napoleon the Legend. I really like Willie Q. Like, these are guys that, obviously I'm friends with and interviewed and stuff, but they're really, like, you can go and check out their work really easily. And people are out, doing great work right now. I'm trying to think, though, of who else, like, I used to do a big like I hate Drake thing, and I realized I don't hate Drake. Drake is fine, but that's just not. I'm never gonna be like overly excited about it. Um, but like yeah, I mean I'm more like I really like Kofi. I really like. I listen to her a lot. I keep up with Chronix. I keep up with John Nine a little bit.
How do you feel about Eminem?
Eminem is a good rapper. And he was never like stylist. Like I never was into like his whole like that whole like I'm kind of like a crazy sort of meth head kind of energy. It's just like not it's not my energy, but I mean I believe me, I certainly knew definitely, I knew kids who that was definitely their energy. But no, the thing that always struck me about Eminem, and again, I heard a little bit of his latest album, though not much of it. And honestly, like if I ever want to just not really, like if I just want to, I listen to Joe Budden's podcast,
Yeah.
and I love Joe Budden. And honestly, because I don't have time and I choose not to keep up with a lot of stuff, he's like my barometer of, like if Nas or somebody like that puts out a new album, I will listen to it for sure. But then like besides that, I just, you know, I listen to like what Joe Budden has to say, and I usually kind of just go with it, like so his review of Eminem's latest was like, okay, I don't think I need to listen to this. But the thing that always struck me about Eminem though that was interesting was like he is like, and I think you can be somewhat objective. I think like part of it is obviously subjective. You can't, each of us have different tastes, and who the hell knows why. But I do think some of this stuff is objective, and like Eminem is like a good rapper.
Yeah.
Like he absolutely, like, even if it's not really your thing or what you would gravitate to, he's a good rapper. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know where he is. Like, I don't even know kind of generally like where he is on like the everybody's list generally.
Mhm.
Like I don't think he's in that top 3 or even top 5, but he's probably usually a top 10, I would
Yeah.
assume. I mean, he's a good rapper.
Yeah, I usually I have this theory that and it's kind of funny to me because Eminem's my favorite artist of all time, but
Eminem is your
I'll
favorite
have this
artist
thing.
of all time?
Oh yes, for sure.
Oh wow. Well, tell me why. What do you love
Well,
so much about him?
so I mean everything. Like
Everything.
he was like the first. He was one of the first artists I ever like really got into like a lot in middle school. So like in middle school, I listened to pretty much him like 24/7, and then like Lady Gaga. That was it.
That's really interesting. Okay.
And yeah, and I bought
So
all of
you
his
like
CDs.
very dramatic
Oh yeah,
performers. Okay.
like him. Like as far as rap music goes, like it's him. Basically everything he does. So I like Bad Meets Evil. I like D12, and then Insane Clown Posse. So like
Okay.
that, yeah. And then let's see. like I bought some Jay-Z CDs. I like Jay-Z, like Blueprint 3,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But no, but my theory about rappers is you can tell the different tier of rappers by what metal band they do a song with or an album with. So Jay-Z did the Collision Course album with Linkin Park.
Right.
And then Nas did a song with Korn, Blame Me.
I didn't know
And
that.
then,
That's
you
hilarious.
gotta
I
look
didn't
it
know that.
up. It's good.
All
And
right.
then Eminem, he did a song with Limp Bizkit, but even they didn't put it on the album that they were gonna put it on. So
Why
that's my
not?
I don't know. They also had a song with the singer of System of a Down, but also didn't end up putting it on the album. I don't know why they ended up not putting it on there, but it ended up getting leaked some years ago too. But that's how I end up. That's my theory of how people should look at the different artists or the rappers, because no one likes Limp Bizkit, although they're underrated, and I would say in some ways Eminem is underrated because people choose to overhype the first three albums of his, but I prefer the latter albums that Eminem has done. And
Okay.
then
So you like his latest album?
oh well, okay, that's changed that. I prefer 2009 to 2015 Eminem. So like
Okay. I got you.
Relapse Recovery, Relapse Recovery, Marshall Mathers LP2. Those are like my three favorite Eminem albums right there. Like I like Kamikaze, and I kind of don't like it as much as I preferred Revival over Kamikaze, which is kind of like a controversial opinion. But and then I like the newest album, kind of. I didn't like it as much because some of the stuff, it kind of, in some ways, it kind of just sounds like he's talking about the same stuff over and over and over again. But it's still good. Like it's lyrically good, and I like it, but I don't listen to it as much. But definitely my favorite album of his is Marshall Mathers LP2, the one he put out in
Marshall
2013.
Mathers LP2. Okay. Yeah, I mean I'm not at all opposed to Eminem. And also I think that's a thing generally with um with people that I don't know, like look, clearly sometimes people do fall off, and Nostradamus is not as good an album as Illmatic. But on the other hand, I mean, for actually It Was Written is like an incredible album, and there's more recent stuff like like I people it's a fine line between sometimes like yeah, you just can't recapture the magic, or you're just kind of tired or whatever. That definitely happens with artists, but I think there is also that people get so they have the same expectation set over and over again. It's just
Yeah,
like, well, what do you want? Like Eminem, maybe he's gotten over his like substance abuse issues. Maybe he's in a different place with his family. Maybe he's thinking about different things. Like, what you don't want these guys to just do the same, like that's what is like when you hear, someone like one of these guys at their best, they're kind of like metabolizing, like they're doing what they did before, but like being, honest about where they're at now. And I think that when they pull it off, that's actually really interesting. And it's obviously more relevant because sometimes, these albums are great, but I mean, you don't want to like I love Illmatic. I really do. I think Illmatic is an incredible album, but there is like I caught myself of like, all right, like you know what? Yes, this is an incredible album. It's an incredible achievement. Everybody should listen to it. But also like there's a 19-year-old in 1994, and like what's being said now. You don't want to be trapped in your own nostalgia. That's one of the reasons. I mean, that's why talking about music is dangerous, because you can just start to age yourself out super quickly.
no kidding.
So it's good. So you're good. So maybe Eminem's later stuff is better, and
Yeah,
everybody's just wants the old stuff, and that's boring.
yeah. But yeah, man. But no, you gotta check out that Korn song with Nas. It's called
Do you
"Play
like
Me."
the Beastie Boys?
I do. I really liked what's it called? "License to Ill." I love
License to
every
Ill.
song on there. Like when I was like a little kid, my favorite song in the world was Brass Monkey, and then
Okay.
when I became a teenager, I was like, what's the album that's on? And then I bought the CD and I loved it. I love License to Ill. That's a really good album. What are some other rap albums I liked? I like there's Jay-Z. I like the Blueprint 3. I like what's it called? I like half of Volume 2 Hard Knock Life. I think is what it
Hmm.
is.
I
I
think
like
that's
that.
what it is too. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't remember all. I don't know his discography like that. I think I know. I mean, I listen. I think it to me, it's all like a blur because he did put out. And
So
I'm
much.
not a Jay Z like some people are. They know everything. It's like I know well, actually, the weirdly the one that I listen to most as an album back to all the way through is the Black Album,
Yeah.
which is good. But I don't. And actually, that's a good. I mean, that was actually something Jay-Z and I guess through Kanye, he did a lot of. It wasn't metal, but like the Takeover, the Doors sample, that's
Yeah.
really good. The 99 Problems when they,
Hmm.
that kind of
That's the
like,
good stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that putting that stuff together was very smart. But honestly, the closest I could get to metal is the Clash, which like
Hmm.
does not even count. But
Yeah.
I do like the
Good
Clash.
stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, have you ever heard the Collision Course album with Linkin Park and Jay-Z? The one where
Well,
they mashed up the songs together?
yeah, but like not like
I get that.
I think I literally heard that like when it came out. Like
Yeah.
it was like played at some, like a party or something. I don't have a great memory of it. It's good.
It's good. I liked it because it was like some of my favorite Linkin Park songs and some of my favorite Jay-Z songs mashed up. So it was, yeah, it's good.
Did you ever hear the this wasn't a collaboration. It was just a straight up mashup of Frank Sinatra and Biggie.
I have not.
See, that actually worked really well because I like things like that when you kind of realize like that obviously, superficially and not just superficially, like it's super different, completely different race, era, genre, listening base, but then you hear it mashed up and you're like, yeah, like actually, if you looked at this with a little bit of, if you're paying it, it's like, yeah, Biggie and Frank Sinatra, they're like the same guy in some ways. This is great. That was like that's also pretty old, and that was like the golden, like people were all about that for a minute. Like there were people did the Gray album where they put together the Beatles and the Jay-Z album, and some of it was fun, whatever. But I really think Biggie and Frank Sinatra was like the pinnacle of that. It really worked. It's like here are these two really cool, ultra charismatic New York guys just like telling stories with a lot of attitude and swag, and that was really fun. That was really really fun. That was a good mashup. But I'll check out the Linkin Park one. You should check out Nas and the Beastie Boys put out a song a couple of years ago. It's really good.
Ooh, I did not
Yeah.
know that. I'll have to
Yeah,
check
that
that
kind
out.
of flew under the radar. I think it might have been because I think it was close to, the lead singer, the Beastie Boys passed away really young. So there might have been I don't exactly know why it kind of flew under, but that is actually a really fun song. Uh and even the video is just like stupid, just like them like being dumb in a supermarket. It's worth watching. You probably like it.
All right.
I had a lot of fun with it. But hey, congratulations on the show, man. It's doing great.
Thanks. So where can we find you on social media and where can we find the Michael Brooks Show?
Well, I would go to if you want, I mean, obviously this is only if you're in a position, but if you want to get the whole thing, you can go to patreon.com/TMBS. But just yeah, watch it on Michael Brooks Show on YouTube, and you can also find me at _ Michael Brooks on Twitter or on iTunes if you listen to on podcasts.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Have a great one. Stay safe and keep going, Gregory. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.